We were basically tied with Audi. The car that everybody knows is the Audi TT RS, the SP4T car, which we brought over to Pikes Peak, broke the front wheel drive record with. My primary mission is to win in class. I won 17 races, in class races over there. The Nürburgring is as fast as you can possibly make a racetrack. There's series of corners that are completely blind. Okay, there's no way that that's full throttle, but yet it is. And then you'll hit the next corner going faster, there's no way that's full throttle, and yet it is.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Flatiron Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This show is brought to you by Flatiron's Tuning, your source for any aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts. Be sure to check out our store at flatironstuning.com and stay tuned with Flatiron's Tuning.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Flatiron Syndicate Podcast. We are here today with another special guest. Today we've got Mr. Robb Holland joining us. And Robb, the people that follow us, they might know you from Pikes Peak this year because you're the person that won the Time Attack 1 class. I think you were driving a 911 GT3. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. 992 GT3 Cup.
Okay, but you've been a competitor in Pikes Peak for a number of years, and I believe you're a Colorado native, so you've actually been around these parts for a long time.
Well, I'm an adoptive native. I've been here for 41 years, so I think that counts as a native. I was originally from New York, but I've been out here for forever, so I consider this my home.
Okay, brilliant. And so are you here in Colorado at the moment?
Yeah, no, I am. Obviously, we're stuck in the 8 inches of snow we've got outside, yes. So definitely Colorado winter weather.
Yes, perfect time to just cozy up to a computer and have a chat about motor.
Absolutely.
Motor racing. Yeah. I noticed here that as far as like competing on wheels and whatnot, you actually started out as a cyclist instead of actually in motorsport. Is that right?
Yeah, no, it's the reason why I'm in Colorado. I was at the Olympic Training Center for a few years, and then fell in love with Colorado. And at the time, Boulder was the center for all of cycling in the country. And so basically I came to Boulder, went to school at Boulder, and have never left. And as a cyclist, it gives you, it was my entrance into the racing side of things. And as a kid, I'd played everything. I was soccer and hockey and basketball and football and lacrosse and all of these different sports. But when I discovered cycling, that was it for me. Like that was my passion and my focus. And I think it was the racing and competitive side of that really kind of, got me going. And then that literally led into almost directly into motorsports. Really?
So to me, like I would have guessed maybe more of a transition into motorcycle racing than cars. How did that transition take place?
Yeah, I like all my toes and fingers pointing in the same direction as I get older. So every motorcyclist I know has hands that are fingers that are everywhere. So no, oddly enough, I was a motorcyclist as well, all through college, but not on the racing side of things, strictly just as a transportation and playing around in the canyons and stuff. But no, it was a kind of an odd segue, I guess. But I lived across the street from a guy named Len Pettyjohn, and Len was the cycling director for the Coors Light team, and he also worked with Greg LeMond when Greg LeMond won a couple of his Tours de France. And so he and I were car geeks. We just loved, racing and all of that. So he was across the street. We'd go sit around, have beers, chat about cars, and just, that kind of stoked. I might always had a passion for it, but that was kind of helped stoked it. And he had said one day, he's like, hey, there's this track day, let's go down and play around. And I'd never done a track day before. And went down there, and at the end of the day, he comes back to me and he goes, dude, this for your first day, he's like, you get it. Like, he's like, I'm watching everybody else flail around. And for someone who's never been on the track before, you've just got a knack for it. You should, maybe think about going to Skip Barber and playing around. And he and I had that conversation about how I was retiring from cycling and looking for other things. And I said, hey, that Skip Barber thing sounds kind of cool. And literally one thing led to another. And 20 some odd years later, I'm still doing it as a pro. It's, not everybody always asks me, they're like, yeah, how did you get into it? I'm like, I am the wrong person to ask that story to, because, it's just so unique and so kind of just as a random thing. But it's worked out.
Well, it's just, you found it and it grabbed you, and then just like I said, 20 years later, here you are.
Yeah. And it's one of those, it's kind of in a way, cycling was the same way. Like, when I first got into cycling, I was pretty good at it right away. And that opened up a lot of doors. And for me as a young kid, those doors were pretty cool doors to walk through. And so that was one of the things that helped, get a hold on me. And motorsports was almost the same way. Like I was really good at it right away. My first pro gig was working with the Dodge factory team, developing their SRO T4 touring cars. And it was fortunate enough for me that the team that was handling a lot of that development was a company called 3R Racing, which was literally 15 minutes away from me in Denver. So, I spent hours and hours and hours and days and weeks just there absorbing everything and being able to be in it at that level, pretty quickly is definitely addicting. So, that's kind of kept me in the sport at the initial phases, and it's kind of one thing again has led to another.
Okay. So what time frame was that? That was probably
early 2000s.
Early 2000s, yeah.
I
early remember 2000s. Seeing 3R running those Vipers around, and then there was at some point.
So that was the combination. They had Tommy Archer and Tim Weens in the Vipers, and then myself and Dan Ueda, who's another current Pikes Peak competitor. He and I were in the SRT4s and leading that development program. So so that was back in the day, the World Challenge days. And it was cool, but it was a bit bizarre to me because, I think when you get into motorsports, you have like this one thing, the direction of what motorsports is all about, and it's crazy guys that are just, hair on fire and doing whatever. And that's kind of the thing that's the what I think draws people, to us. But the reality of it's tons of engineering, it's tons of data, it's tons of, just sitting there doing debriefs and all of that stuff was not what I expected at all. But at the same point in time, it was super interesting to me. So it worked out really well that it was just kind of a 1-2 punch that really sucked me into it.
So I was wondering, so as far as you took cycling, I mean, that's definitely very physically demanding. It's very mentally demanding. And if you're going to compete, like you have to start really kind of looking at the whole, like everything that goes into a race, like the preparation leading up to the race, running the race, all of those sorts of things. When you moved to motorsports, was there a lot of overlap there in terms of like the mental preparation and the strategy to come into like preparing for a race weekend and whatnot, just from that?
Yeah, no, and honestly, I think that's one of the reasons that I found really initial success with motorsports was because there was so much overlap. Even though you wouldn't think it, it's 2 wheels versus 4, it's horsepower versus pedal power. But the thing that was weird is that the mental side of things was very, very similar. I mean, you look in cycling and I'm riding around with 150, 200 other guys, inches from each other, high heart rate, high exertion. The mental side of things where you're trying to maneuver yourself through the pack, and all of those things translate very well into racing cars. And that, I think, allowed me to mainly focus on just driving the car. I didn't have this, bandwidth where I was having to figure out all of these other things, all of that taking up my mental bandwidth. And, it allowed me to focus on driving. And that allowed me to get my, my driving to the level that it was.
Right on. Yeah, it kind of makes sense when you think about it, but it's just like from the outside, you would not expect there to be that much kind of overlap necessarily. But yeah.
No, I mean, honestly, it was a surprise for me until I started getting asked the question later on in my career, and then you start thinking about it, and you're like, well, no, actually, it's very similar. And I still ride my bike, on a daily basis, and so it is always interesting to me when I'm on the bike and kind of all of the senses I'm using and the things that I'm thinking about. It is an absolute overlap. So, and the thing that was great for me is that in cycling, in motorsport, I've had years where I've done 25, 28 events during the course of the year, which is a really busy year. I mean, you're racing every other weekend pretty much. Yeah. But then in cycling, I would do 2 races a weekend from February through October, so you're racing 100 and some odd times a year. And wow. So you're in that competition mode far more often as a cyclist. And so again, all of those things that I was, that I've translated into motorsports, I had a whole bunch of time to perfect, and especially at a very young age. I mean, I started cycling when I was, in my early teens. And so you really have that, like my formation as a person and as an athlete really was that foundation was what, you know, kind of blossomed in cycling and then translated right into motorsports.
Oh, brilliant. One of the things in preparing for our conversation that I noticed is that you competed in the British Touring Car Championship.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe you're actually the first American to compete in a full season. And when you're talking about this like a level of competition, I believe that full season was it 30 races or something along those lines?
Yeah, you do 3 races a weekend, so it is pretty crazy. But no, I mean, honestly, so the funny thing about this all is that British Touring Car is what ignited my passion in motorsports, which is odd because it's a little niche. It's not Formula One, it's not IndyCar, it's not NASCAR. And so from an American kid to find and then, you know, grab onto you know, British Touring Car was a bit unique. And for me, when I first saw the British Touring Car races on TV, the cool thing about it for me was that the cars looked like cars that I was driving on the street. And then you're watching them bounce off curbs and slide, and you're just like, how are these guys doing this? This is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Like, why isn't everybody a massive fan of this sport? Mm-hmm. And it was great. And that was what really ignited kind of the passion, is because the cars look like my street car. And so I'd always, you know, again, and this is in the 90s, so long before my motorsport career was even a glimmer in my eye, you know, it was there. And so going into it into the 2000s when I turned pro, I then had it in the back of my mind like, well, hey, I'm actually fairly good at this. Maybe there's an opportunity for me in British Touring Car. And nothing really presented itself. And 5, 6, 7, 8 years go by. And the Volvo program that I was a part of, the factory Volvo program, ended. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And I said, you know what? This is the perfect opportunity. Let me just put some feelers out there. And my guys from Honda, Lee Neffenegger from Honda, I was chatting with him in a casual conversation, and he's like, hey, we've got a team there that runs a car that there might be a seat available. And so he made the connection, and basically we hit it off, and I signed a deal to go do 2 races in British Touring Car. And unbeknownst to me, they had when I'd made the announcement, it turns out that I was the 3rd American to go and race in British Touring Car. The last the last 2 Americans to do it were some up and coming actor named Steve McQueen and an okay race car driver named Dan Gurney. And so
we'll have to see if those guys ever did anything.
If they ever amounted to anything in motorsports and in acting. Yeah. But it was really cool because all of it was fairly big news over in the UK to have an American come in, and so all of the articles were Robb Holland, Dan Gurney, and I'm like, I have never ever imagined in my entire life that I would be mentioned in an article alongside Dan Gurney,
Pretty good
other than an article saying Robb Holland is not as good as Dan Gurney, which is kind of an obvious article.
Cool.
But then there's a cool story that goes along with it that honestly was one of my highlights, is that we were racing at the 25 Hours of Thunderhill, and that was the year we won overall. And I'm wandering around the paddock, and I was talking to one of our competitors who wanted to do a podcast with me, and I said, yeah, sure, great. And we were chatting, and I told him the whole Dan Gurney thing, and he goes, well, Dan Gurney's granddaughter is our PR person. And I was like, I did not know that. I said, would you do me a favor, introduce us, because I would love to meet her and just tell her how much of an inspiration, her granddad was, and the fact that I did British Touring Car. So we chatted, I met her and we chatted. And then later on that day, I'm walking through the paddock, and she sees me, she goes, Rob, come here. And I walk over and she hands me the phone, and it's Dan Gurney on the other line.
Wow.
And Dan is like, hey, we've been following you. He's like, I'm really glad we reached out. And literally, I'm standing in the middle of the paddock at Thunderhill, like in the middle of a 25-hour race. And Dan and I talked for the better part of an hour. He's telling me all the stories and this, that, and the other. And finally, one of my team guys goes, he's like, Rob, you got to get in the car. And I'm like, Dan, I'm sorry, I've got to go. But we'd struck up a friendship, and he's an amazing person. And, it's a great loss to the community when he passed. But it was a huge honor to me to be able to get to know him and share some of those stories.
Oh, amazing. Wow. Yeah, talk about the small world of motorsports. Like you never know like what
No.
connections are going to form out of that. That's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, to guys who I consider, legends in the sport, to be able to make that connection was really, yeah. It's one of those things. You'll just it's all the trophies and all of that stuff, but then you have that connection that just blows everything away. So super cool, super
Absolutely. Cool. Well, so you said what attracted to you was with the British touring car was the fact that these looked like cars that you were familiar with, that you could go out and buy, get in the seat and drive. So once you actually get out there and you start doing it, like, did you find out that they were actually, in fact, quite different? Maybe even like all they looked the same, but that was about the appearance was about the only connection between the street cars.
Yeah, I mean, they still have a good basis. I mean, so the interesting thing is that they were closer to World Challenge cars than I would have thought. I mean, at the time I was racing World Challenge, the development of the cars were pretty high. Not super touring era cars, but not ridiculously far off. I mean, sequential gearboxes and bespoke suspension and all of the things that make touring cars really quick. But the British touring cars at that time were a complete other level. I mean, the amount of development that had gone into them, was all, super manufacturer level, companies that involved and are still currently involved in F1. You're looking at Williams and, Ray Malek and all of those guys, RML. I mean, it did ridiculous levels of engineering. But the cars were very similar. Actually, I won't say they were easier to drive, but they're far more dynamic because they had things that were allowed, like they had a dynamic rear toe that basically is a damper on the rear control arm, and basically the damper allows that when the car takes a load to tow out the outside wheel, that allows the car to rotate. Which I had never seen before, and it was like this eye-opening thing. So you throw the car into the corner, and it starts to take a set, and then it just rotates on itself. And so you just have to like time the rotation. So that was kind of the struggle as a driver trying to adapt to these things. Is that it's a driving style that these guys had developed over the years. That was something that I had to learn, and then learn the car, and then learn the track because I had never been there before. And then you look at what British touring car is and the level of driver that's there, and it's not just the front running guys. It's not the top 5 or the top 10 guys. It's the top. I mean, the years I were running, it was 30 plus cars, and I would say 30 of those drivers had the ability to win a race. When we were qualifying at Silverstone, I come across the line. I said what I thought was a real good time, and my engineer's like, okay, you're 7/10 off pole. Can you get another push lap? And I'm like, I think that was all I had. And I'm like, but 7/10 off pole, man, that was a really good lap. And Matt Neal was on pole, 2-time touring car champion. And I go, okay, well, cool. Where does that put us? And he said P27.
Whoa.
And I went, it's and that's the level of racing over there, which is tough because I come from a series where I was a front running driver. To then go to British touring car and be P27 is kind of a kick in the gut. But at the same time, it was awesome to be amongst what I consider the best of the best touring car drivers. So it was cool.
Well, and you had that perspective of racing over here in the States and then going over there and racing in BTCC. Other than like the people that were involved and the development that was involved, was it just like a different approach, or was it just the fact that like the level of competition was for the drivers and the teams was just kind of like a step above kind of what some of the things were going on over here in the States at the time?
It's just, no, I think it's the depth more than anything else. I mean, the level of engineering we have, the level of car development, I think, some of it's just the rule set that we have here that we're developing cars to. But, you look at what British touring car is in the UK, and the closest thing I can put it to is NASCAR. And I think that if you look at it that way, you look at the NASCAR drivers and you look at the top 20 guys and you look at the names that are in there and you're like, any one of them could win a race on any given moment. British touring car is the same way. It's that same level of teams and cars and drivers and budgets and everything else. And then you throw in, the fact that, the UK is the home for pretty much every Formula One team. Right. And whether it's trickle down from those guys, or honestly, I think a lot of it's the ebb and flow of people from companies. You go, a guy that's an engineer, whether it's a suspension engineer, aerodynamicist, or whatever, working for Formula One, then, they retire because they don't want to do the grind anymore. And then they're like, but I still want to do stuff. Well, British touring car. So now you've got a guy that, with, McLaren F1 experience or Mercedes F1 experience, bringing all of that knowledge, all of those processes and procedures and everything else into British touring car. And so now it takes another step. We had people that were working for us in British touring car that were also, they were moonlighting for us in British touring car, but working for F1 teams during the day, rebuilding gearboxes and stuff like that. So, wow. And it's great because you'll sit down and have a conversation and they're like, well, but, McLaren does it this way. And you're just like, then we will do it that way. Because clearly they know what they're doing. Yeah. And so that was the cool thing. And our base, while I was over there, was at Silverstone. And so we were right across the street from, at the time it was Force India, but right up the road from McLaren, right up the road from Mercedes, right up the road from Red Bull. And I mean, literally in the heart of all of it. So it's cool stuff. Very cool stuff.
And I imagine, I've heard some stories being there around Silverstone, or kind of in the center of the UK, as it were. There's so many manufacturing centers around there, like your access to not only talented people that are working on Formula One teams or whatever, but the companies that are building things for the Formula One teams or engineering things for them is also pretty high. So maybe there's some
all of our body work, our aerodynamics. I was doing some sim development work with Aaron Turner and his base performance, which is all of the up and coming kids that are trying to get into Formula One. They're all coming through there. So, again, I mean, it was it's an amazing experience, and you absorb it like a sponge. There's just so much information and knowledge, and it's a lot of it's just talent. You're around a group of incredibly talented people, and that just wears off on you. You're just like, you understand, you can see the talent, and you're just like, okay, great. Whatever you can give me from your talent, I will take as much as possible. In fact, I'd say my biggest regret is not having done that as at the start of my career. The things that I learned are, just amazing, just off the charts. I literally could spend days talking about all the things that that came out of it, and it's to this day, it's I'd say it's the secondary. It's like going to graduate school. That's the best way to put it. Is when I came into to pro level racing, it was like getting my college degree, going and racing British touring car and racing at the Nurburgring. That was the masters. That was the PhD.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you can do that, you put all the pieces in place to do that. You get it to the point where you can know what it takes to prepare for that, run those races. Like you're now at a pretty high level, and there's it opens a lot of doors, I'm sure.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and it just, again, it's information and knowledge you take with you. And as I've working more as a team owner and a shop owner, all of those lessons have come into play. There's things I use every single day. I think it's the thing that's like, you go to college and you're just bored sitting in classes. You're like, I want practical knowledge. I want to be out there learning the stuff that I really can apply to other things. And that was British touring car, and that was for sure the Nürburgring, and working with the manufacturers over there.
For sure. So I got to ask you about Rotek Racing. So because you're one of the founders of Rotek Racing, and I believe that you started that right about the time when you started competing in BTCC, but that's something that you've kept going to this very day.
Yeah.
How did you decide to basically take that step or make that leap?
Not intentionally. Okay. It was and actually, I think literally I could literally title my book like unintentional. I don't think there's ever been like this, okay, I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this. It's just like things have happened and I've just ended up going with the flow. And Rotec basically was founded by myself and my buddy Roland Pritzker. And that's the Ro. So RO, Rotec and Rob, Rotec, Roland. And tech was just, something cool. So we started that at the Nürburgring, with the idea of bringing American drivers over to the Nürburgring. We always hear from a lot of drivers that, hey, the Nürburgring would be great, or racing over in Europe or overseas would be great, but we don't know anything about it. We don't have the experience. We don't speak German. We don't know. And that's always a really a big step, I think, or big barrier, I would say, in getting overseas is just the unknown. And it's like, well, I'll just do IMSA, I'll just do SRO, and I'll be happy and be done. And so we wanted to be that. We're here, we have a base here, we speak English, we know the track, we know the teams, we know everything. And that's what we did. And we had, a bunch of guys come over from the US and come through the program and get their Nürburgring licenses. And it's all going really well. And it was really funny because it was taking a while to kind of gain traction. And we ended up having a lot more British and European drivers come over simply because of my participation in the British Touring Car Championship and the FIA World Touring Car Championships. All of those drivers looking to prepare for racing there came through our program. So it was not quite what we planned on it, but it ended up being a really good thing because obviously we had a really high level of drivers come through. We had Rob Huff and Tom Chilton. Rob Huff was World Touring Car Champion at the time. We had Sebastian Loeb and his whole program come through. Obviously Seb is 9-time, and then Pikes Peak and Seb. And just some really amazing drivers, Gabriele Tarquini and Tiago Montero, 2 XF1 drivers, all guys, that came through Rotec. And so, it was a very cool experience there. But it took us a while to get the Americans to come over for whatever reason. But as I transitioned out of Europe, Rotec is still over there and we still have a base. We started seeing more and more and more and more Americans. And I think, my thought is that us being there, all of the social medias that came out there, our success, I won 17 races, class races over there with the Audi. And I think that spurred a lot of people to go, well, hell, if Rob can do it, I can do it. And now we're seeing, tons of guys, James Clay and Thelonious. And there's tons of guys that are over there now. And it's a cool feeling to me that hopefully we did, had an effect on opening the door over there. But now I'm kind of jealous that all those guys are racing over there. I'm back here in the States shoveling snow in Denver.
If only you knew somebody over there that you could have, the friendly bridge to have a
if only I had that base.
Yes. Well, that's so. What kind of cars did you start with that when you're running this program that were over there at the Nürburgring or running these series, and what kind of cars are you guys running currently?
Well, we're not running any cars currently. We've kind of just paused operations. We still have the facility over there. It's being leased by Miltech Exhaust. But we still have all of our connections and we still look to do some things over there. But we were basically tied with Audi very strongly over there. So the car that everybody knows is the Audi TTRS, the SP4T car, which we brought over to Pikes Peak. That's the car that we broke the front wheel drive record with. That was the car, that was our main car, and that car was an absolute weapon over there. It was unbelievable. It was one of my favorite cars because I love the underdog cars that surprise every once in a while. And the TTRS was designed, obviously the street car is an all-wheel drive, but all-wheel drive doesn't really have an advantage at the Nürburgring because everything is so fast. All-wheel drive really only comes into play stop and go when you can accelerate off corners quicker. And so they basically, to save weight and driveline loss, they removed the rear-wheel drive portion and it became a front-wheel drive car. But it was a front-wheel drive GT3 car. It was absolutely, it had as much aero as the GT3 cars had at the time. It had all of the suspension stuff that the GT3 cars had. And the only thing it didn't have, the only thing that it was limited by was power. And it was running the same power of the street cars, 380 horsepower. And the car was just absolutely wickedly fast. In fact, in the rain, we were actually quicker than the GT3 cars. We would literally get held up by the GT3 cars. That car is the only car to win, only front-wheel drive car to ever win an NLS race, or at that time it was a VLN race, That was overall. So, wow. It's that's how quick it was. In bad weather, that was the dominant car to have because it was so stable, so well planted. You could just drive the, wheels off of the thing. But it was great because, that was a factory car from Audi. So, working with Audi Germany on that and developing the cars. And we were seen as the cowboy Americans when we showed up. We were the idiots. We were the guys that don't know what they're doing. And, the first couple of races, we just getting our feet wet and all of that stuff. And we did okay, but it wasn't anything that was, a great, strong result. And we basically did some engineering on the car and recognized that the suspension on that car, the shocks weren't, they just weren't working for us. And we needed something better and something different. And so we were working with JRZ at the time and we got permission from Audi to put the JRZs on, and we were 12 seconds a lap quicker. And we then went on a tear, and I think we won the next 8 races in a row. And that kind of surprised a bunch of the guys at Audi and then kind of put us on the map over there. So, in fact, there was one race that was chucking down rain. It was absolutely terrible. The car was all over the place. It was an absolute mess. And I'm just complaining, and I'm on my radio on Dotha Gaho, which is the long straightaway. And I'm coming around and I'm like, guys, we got to make a suspension change or an aero change or something. The car is terrible. I can't drive it. And my engineer gets on the radio, and you run in waves, and we were always the second wave just because of the class of what we were in. So there's no way to tell where you are other than in your wave. And my engineer's like, Rob, you're running really well, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. And he's like, you're P6, and I'm like, in my wave, and he's like, no, you're P6 overall. And I went, okay, I'll shut up and drive the car. We're good.
Not that bad after all. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I mean, it was really good, and we really got a handle on that car, and it was an absolute blast to drive.
And this is the same car that you brought over and ran in Pikes Peak. At least was it once or twice?
No, just the once. Okay. Yeah, it's funny because I originally we were supposed to do Pikes Peak in 2012, and 034 Motorsports had brought me on to run one of their cars, and it spun a rod bearing or something, and we ended up not being able to run. What happened was I was supposed to run it. It then the fires at Colorado Springs happened, so I couldn't run it. And where they moved the date was the British Touring Car. It was my British Touring Car debut. And so Randy Post was supposed to run it, and the car unfortunately spun a rod bearing, and they couldn't run. But and then the next time I had, because I was spending so much time over in Europe, I didn't have a chance to run it again until 2016, and we didn't have a car. And I said, well, let's bring the TTRS over and run it and go for a front wheel drive record. And but it was the decision, which we did. The decision was made really late, though, so there was no opportunity to change anything on that car. We brought it over as a VLN racer. So, it was an endurance car. It had a massive fuel cell. It had gearing designed for the Nürburgring, not for the twists and turns of Pikes Peak. And it was carrying a bunch of extra weight because of the endurance equipment it had. And, so it was a great run up the hill, all of those things considered. And we had planned on the next year making the changes that we needed to make it even more Pikes Peak specific. And we had actually had that car up on the market for a couple of years because we were moving into GT3. And what was it, 2 or 3 months before the race, basically a guy came up and said, yep, here's all the money and we'd like the car. We're moving it to New Zealand. And I was like, okay, now what do I drive? And that's when we did the salvage Corvette that we built. And that was just a thrash to throw something on the hill. But it was really unfortunate because, the Acura guys came along and broke my record. I think it was 3 years later by 6 seconds. And it was one of those things that's like, oh, we would have gone 30 seconds quicker had we got the car dialed. So it's always been in the back of my head that it's just like, that I really would have wanted to put the front wheel drive record a bit farther out of reach, but it is what it is. We had it for a minute, and I'm pretty happy about that one.
Well, and you probably have some good ideas of what it would take to drop it down that other 30 seconds. So if you ever get the wild hair.
Oh, no. I mean, it's the tough part now is that we're so off doing all these other stuff, and running the GT4 cars there. That was great because that's a class that I think is really taking off at Pikes Peak. So to be able to found that and help keep that moving was really, really great. And then now going up with the Cup car last year, and then we're working on a deal with another Porsche for next year, and that's kind of the direction we've been going. And then we're looking at maybe a specific Pikes Peak build for 27 or 28. Okay. So it's not that it's completely gone. It's in the back of my mind, and I know exactly
on the horizon.
Yeah, I know exactly what I do. Like, I almost really want to just run 2 cars, just get the helicopter to pick me up at the top of the mountain, or take the cog railway back down and run around and then jump up and run into another car. If the rules allowed that, trust me, I would do it.
I think for a while, didn't the Vascholds do that for 1 or 2 years?
Yeah, and I think they outlawed it just because of that. So, and Clint and I have chatted about that a bit. And it was like, all right, so how'd you guys pull that one off? So, it would be fun to do. But I also don't, my primary mission is to win in class.
Sure.
And I think that, it's always a tough thing with the front wheel drive because it's so not suited for what Pikes Peak is, with a lot of the hairpin turns and the steepness of the grades. It's really, really hard to get front traction. So we have all of the engineering, because we did the Audi S3 with Blue Water for a number of years. But that car, while it was a really good car, the way it put power down was made it very, very difficult for that car to be quick. And because of how that car was built and designed originally, there wasn't really an easy way to kind of modify it to get it to be where it was good. We were close. I think we were 3 seconds off 1 year, and they finally got it dialed in the following year. But the guy who actually owned that car decided he wanted to step back in, and unfortunately had a big accident, and that car is no more. But yeah, so it is, again, back in my mind. Would love to snatch that one back. But we've got a few other records on our radar, so hopefully we'll be able to snag another one.
Yeah, well, and I want to get back to the build of the car, but I wonder about Pikes Peak. Like, when did Pikes Peak then come on your radar, or was it always on your radar?
Always.
As much time as you spent here.
Yeah, always. I came down 1 year as a spectator when it was dirt. And it blew me away back then. This is even before again, my racing career was even a thought in my head. I do remember how crazy I thought those guys were. I was just these guys are absolutely mental. There's no way ever I could ever do this. And again, that's what one of the things that I am the fondest of in my career is because I got a relatively late start. I remember my thoughts, and I remember my experiences of being at these races or watching these races, and what the regard that I held the guys that were out there competing in, and so it's a huge honor to me to kind of now be amongst those guys, and so it's definitely something that I'll keep. But yeah, Pikes Peak is Pikes Peak. It's one of those where if you have even an inkling of interest in motorsports, it is on your radar. And so from my perspective, it was, I would say Pikes Peak and BTC were probably the 2 things that were of the most interest to me. And the funny thing for me is that I'm actually more well known for the stuff I've done at Pikes Peak than almost anything else I've done in my career. If I travel abroad, that's the thing that gets brought up first is Pikes Peak.
Interesting. It seems like the nostalgia, or not the nostalgia, the draw for Pikes Peak is it's like on a whole nother level over in Europe, or where hill climbs are held in higher regard than they are here in the States. One of the funniest thing is, like, you test, you come down the mountain, you're having breakfast, and people are telling you, what are you doing here? Oh, we're running Pikes Peak. Oh, when is that?
Yeah. Yep.
Sunday. Like it's
right now.
Yeah.
No, it's Europe, it's massive. And it's not just Europe, like internationally. I was at the Macau Grand Prix in 2016 or 17, and I'd been hired on by the Seat team to run one of their cars at Macau. and the engineers and mechanics are at my car in the start line for the race on the Saturday. And I was off doing something. I don't remember what it was. And I came back to the car, and, these engineers I've been working with for a couple of days, and they're like, "Who are you?" I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "We've had like 20 fans like over the course of the past hour come by the car to find out where you were." And they're like, and I was like, "Well, what?" And so anyways, the fans saw that I was there and came back, and it was all Pikes Peak. Everything was Pikes Peak. There was no one cared about my British touring car. No one cared about my Nürburgring. No one cared about Volvo or Audi or whatever. Pikes Peak. That was the thing. And so here I am in, Macau, over in the middle of, middle of Asia. And, that's what you're known for. And more so than any other driver on the grid. I mean, I'm literally in all of the world touring car drivers. I mean, the world champions there, Von Muller, Rob Huff, all of these guys, Shilton. I was the one who got 20 fans, lurking around because of Pikes Peak.
I've heard things like this from other people that are overseas, just about how just renowned Pikes Peak is, and it's just so fascinating to hear these stories. And then just we're kind of down the road from it, and you're there participating the week of, and it's just it's like this secret race that is internationally just so popular.
No, but I mean, I think a lot of it is just the images that come out, the visuals that come off of Pikes Peak. I mean, they're just absolutely stunning. And, even to me as a competitor, and I've been doing this for a decade now, every year I come up to the hill and I'm just blown away about how beautiful it is. And then, Larry Chen shoots our pictures, and every day I get 20, 30 pictures from Larry, and I'm just like, man, these, pictures I get every single year, and it's Larry, so he always finds a way to make them look amazing. But but even still, every year I've got a new desktop photo for the year, and it's always from Pikes Peak, and it's always amazing. So I think it's easy. I think that those images and getting it's very easy to show that, hey, look, there's a 1,000-foot drop off right there, and you get that image of a car running along the edge of a mountain with 1,000 feet, that's just
and the clouds are down here.
Yes.
You're looking down on the clouds. You don't see that very often.
No, and again, these are all things that translate internationally, regardless. There's no language barrier. There's no anything. And I think that's what it is. I mean, I think really, when you look at F1 racing, and nothing against F1, nothing against NASCAR, IndyCar, any of those. I mean, they're amazing teams and drivers. But I think when you've kind of seen it all, going to Long Beach is like going to Monaco, is like going to, this, that, and the other. But there are a few races that are so noticeable, just for the images they present, that they just transcend everything else. You look at the Nürburgring or Bathurst or Pikes Peak or Macau, with the super narrow mountain section there. All of those things make it very, very easy to say, no, the guys that are doing this, they're the best of the best, because you don't do this with, and make a mistake and get to come back next year.
Yeah. Do you remember, you put yourself back in your head when you were driving up Pikes Peak, for practice the first time, or maybe the first year as an actual race? How did it compare with all of the other racing that you'd done? Did you actually even find yourself going whoa, that's a cliff over there. I can't, get the red mist. I've got to kind of, take a step back a little bit here because of just what I'm seeing out here.
No, the funny thing is that it's not just the first year; it's every year. I was having a chat with a very well-known driver who has been very successful at Pikes Peak. He will remain nameless. I was 2 years ago. We were running up in the first day of practice, and I come in after my first run, and I'm like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I've clearly lost something. And the guy goes, no. He's like, I feel that way every year. He's like, give it 3 or 4 runs and you'll be fine. And 3 or 4 runs later, I was fine. But it literally is that first moment. You're just like, this is unlike anything else I do anywhere. And it is tough. And the first year, it's funny enough, because I've carried a in-car camera long before it was cool to carry an in-car camera. And I have video from my first test day at Pikes Peak. And then I have all the video from my first, year of running Pikes Peak. And I'm driving in the middle of the road. I am nowhere near the edges. I am not using, I'm just like, all right, if If I stay on this yellow line, I'm good to go. And, you know, it's almost embarrassing when you look back on it. But, you know, it is what it is. Like it literally is. That is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. It is a survival instinct. You know, and it wasn't until I think the last day of practice that I finally really settled down in the TTRS, and that's what allowed us to go so quickly for the record. But I will tell you, the first couple of days I was not that quick.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a different environment. Like a unique environment. I mean, you're not going to find a road that you can race on in those conditions basically anywhere else, which is probably why, you know, Pikes Peak has, you know, this prestige that it does.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really funny because you know, the first year I went, there's a bit of arrogance that you have because, you know, I was racing for so many years and I'm like, I've been all over the world and I've raced. So Pikes Peak is just another race. You know, it's you do the same things and you know, you get the same result. And that is absolutely not the case at Pikes Peak. You know, we, the first year with the Audi, we, you know, we had our tire blankets and, you know, we get up there and we set up everything up and we set the generators up and plug the tire blankets in and fire everything up. And I wander off and come back right before we're supposed to go up. And I, you know, put my hand on the tire and it was barely warm. And I'm like, I don't understand. These are the same tire blankets, same generator, same everything that we use. What did we do wrong? Like, guys, you know, work on this. And I come back from my run and they're, oh, we don't know. And we're sitting there thinking and we're like, we're idiots. Generator is just a motor and it's a normally aspirated motor and we are at 13,000 feet. And at 13,000 feet, we are putting out 40% of the horsepower, which means we're putting out 40% of the electricity, which means we are way underpowered for these blankets. So we literally had to go out and rent generators. But it was this the moment that I was just like, this is not like anything else I've ever done. And yeah, it's true to this day. Like if you disrespect Pikes Peak, if you ever at any moment aren't giving it 100% respect, it is going to bite you and it's going to bite very hard.
And a lot of times in weird ways that like that with the generators, like you could not see it coming. You probably wouldn't plan for it. You've got to just be paying attention to everything so you can pick up on the weird little things that might crop up on practice day or on race day and then address it as best you can.
Yeah, and the mountain throws everything at you. And like you said, I could easily be running this mountain for a decade and next year run into a whole bunch of different things that I've never seen before. And that is, I think, one of the things that most people don't understand about Pikes Peak. It is how much it changes. Like the mountain is a living organism. There is no two ways about it. I don't care what people think about that, whatever. The mountain literally is. Every single year, Pikes Peak is different, and you've got to be on your toes. And, you know, like the fact that this year we didn't get to the top because 120 mile an hour winds. Like, I've never seen that at Pikes Peak before. Never has ever happened, you know. But yet, I now know that, hey, at some point in time, there could be 120 mile an hour winds. That you could come around, you know, you can come around Cog Cut, or you can come around up in Devil's Playground and go from very well sheltered, very well protected into gale force winds.
Yeah. And all these cars with giant aero, because there's no air up there. Now what happens? I mean, I understand why they shut it down. It makes total sense. But yeah, it was just a crazy thing.
I fully support them. Yeah, everybody wants to run to the top. No one on the mountain wants us to go halfway. And so, you know, the people, you know, Melissa and Dan and all of Randy, all of the guys that are running the hill climb, really they're passionate about it just like we're passionate about it. So you know, if they go, hey, look, we can't run to the top, that they get no argument from me.
Right. It's for very good reason. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've kind of alluded to this, but one of the things I wanted to ask, especially with as much driving as you've done at the Nürburgring, because the Nürburgring just is this, I mean, it's this pantheon for cars and automotive development and all that. And now you've run at Pikes Peak. I mean, it sounds like just from the little pieces you've said so far, it is very different to prepare a car to run at the Nürburgring compared to Pikes Peak.
Oh, you couldn't be any more different. The biggest thing, and it's a surprise that you only really recognize until you look in data, but you're not, on average, going particularly fast at Pikes Peak. You know, your VMAX, you know, in the Cup car, it was 122, 123 miles an hour. And your average speed is about 70 miles an hour. which for a race car is fairly low speeds, until you consider that you have, probably 40 hairpin turns that you're slowing down to, 15, 20 miles an hour to go through. When you recognize that, then you recognize that Pikes Peak is kind of a series of drag strips. Like it's a stop, turn, and then shoot the car up the road. Now, that none of that takes away from the difficulty of what Pikes Peak is. Everybody always thinks that you've got to be doing 180 miles an hour for it to be difficult. No, you just need to be going as fast as it's possible to go on any given road, and that's the difficult part. The Nürburgring is literally 180 degrees opposite. It is as fast as you can possibly make a racetrack, which is, again, really surprising to me. I remember doing, video games with the Nürburgring, and I basically tell people now who haven't been, I was like, when you drive something in a simulator like iRacing, whatever, you always are able to overdrive the car. You take a corner completely flat that in real life you would never take flat. Like it's just, because there's no consequences. Mm-hmm. The Nürburgring is video game fast. Like there are corners that are completely blind. In fact, there's series of corners that are completely blind that you're like, okay, there's no way that's full throttle. But yet it is. And then you'll hit the next corner going faster, there's no way that's full throttle. And yet it is. And then you'll hit literally it's that. It is the amount of speed you carry at the Nürburgring is absolutely insane, considering how narrow the track is, how many race cars are on the track, and how almost all of those corners are completely blind corners. And it is, I call it the world's greatest momentum track. When I first came there, I was, I don't remember what it was, 8 or 10, maybe even more, 12 seconds off the pace from the fast running guys. And I'm like, I've never been that far. Now, yeah, it's a 8-minute lap. So it's not as if you're, it's a shorter lap that you can kind of relay, like 8 or 10 seconds on a minute and a half course is a lot. So, but even still, I was like, even if you chopped it up into components where it was, call it 6 racetracks, even then I'm 2 seconds off the pace. So I'm like, that's a lot. And I struggled for a while understanding where all the time losses were. And what it is because it's such a momentum track, every mile an hour you are slow in one corner carries for a huge distance. And so you'll lose 2 miles an hour coming off of this corner because you're just not carrying the speed through there. But you carry that 2 mile an hour loss for 30 seconds. And it's just that you're basically losing time that whole entire time. So that 2 mile an hour loss. So it is really, really, really incredibly difficult for first-time drivers to be quick there. Because even if you know the corners and understand it, it is having that commitment to be able to carry every single mile an hour you can. And there are a couple corners that until I got quick enough that I could stay with the faster guys that I didn't even understand. And then when I was behind them, I was like, oh, you don't brake here. It's just a lift and you carry speed and I'm like, and then all of a sudden it's like your times come down and then you're competitive. But it is unlike Pikes Peak's unlike anything else out there.
Well, with the Nürburgring, I'm guessing too that there's other corners that would trick you where you'd think, okay, this is the one where I don't have to hit the brakes, but no, it is. You do have to slow down more. So you've got to be able to keep track of everything, which is, one of the challenges with Pikes Peak is there's so many corners, and it's like there's like finding visual markers to kind of understand, like really have in your head where you're at on the track at all times can be a little bit challenging.
Yeah, so the Nürburgring's easier that way because there are way more visual references. I mean, it's a regular track in the sense that there's braking markers, and because you're doing multiple laps, yeah, they're long laps, but there are things that you could pick up. You're like, oh, there's that crack in the road, or there's that tree, or there's that weird looking thing on the curbing. Like all of those things you can pick up as reference points. Pikes Peak, you don't have that. I mean, you have tons of reference points, but it's the rock and the tree and the thing that looks like the other rock and the other tree. And
they're all pine trees. Yeah,
right. They're all pine trees. Is it that pine tree or was it that pine tree I break? I don't remember. Yeah. So that's where they're different that way. But in other senses that they're very similar because the thing about both of them are, and a lot of people don't recognize about the Nürburgring is that it's bumpy. there are a lot of big compressions and a lot of big bumps. So in order to go fast at the Nürburgring, it's the same as Pikes Peak. Not only do you have to know the track, but you have to know the bumps. And so that's kind of where they are very, very similar in knowing, when to push and when not to push. There are corners at the Nürburgring that, you look at it and you go, yeah, that corner was flat back there. This corner is just as easy, just go. But yet there's a big bump on the entrance that upsets the car. And Pikes Peak is the same way. You're like, oh, I could brake way deeper. But yeah, you brake deep in the cog cut and, you end up on the cog railway. So, that's where it gets way, way more similar. The difference for Pikes Peak though is that it's the bumps at Pikes Peak are constantly changing. So you kind of know where they're going to be, but you don't know what they're going to be until you get there.
Yeah. Well, now knowing what you've known, because you've kind of so you did front wheel drive at Pikes Peak, you did the Corvette, which is rear wheel drive, and now I guess the GT3 Cup car is rear wheel drive as well. Mm-hmm. So you haven't done all wheel drive at Pikes Peak yet, is that right?
Not yet. So the first car that I was going to run when I ran there was supposed to be an all-wheel drive Audi S4 or something like that. So I have run it in testing, but knowing what I know now, that car would not have been competitive or as competitive as I would have wanted it to be. It was, again, you until you've run Pikes Peak and look at it from an engineer side of things, you have a view of what you think will be successful there, and it is probably the wrong view. The guy who I actually have a lot of respect for and we chat quite often is Robin Shoot. And Robin has looked at it. I mean, Robin's an engineer that can drive or driver that is a good engineer. I don't know how you want to put it, but either way, he's good at both of those things. And in developing his new car, he and I have talked, and I've also seen a lot of his YouTube stuff, that he has a really good understanding of what it takes to go quickly at Pikes Peak. Not just from a driver's perspective, but what car would you build? So that's why him building this new car is really, really fascinating. And he and I have a couple of philosophical differences. I don't think it's major stuff, but I think it's also, some of it is I'm a sports car driver and he's a prototype open wheel driver. But yeah, it's great to have those conversations and get some more insight as to what makes a properly quick car at Pikes Peak. And I'm super excited. So if anyone hasn't seen those, the YouTube videos, the Sendy Club the Sendy Club is he's got about a couple dozen videos out now, that are really, really good. And then the car he drove last year, that was the GTO or whatever that thing was, the Camaro. He's gone and done some in-depth stuff on the aero they worked on with that. So there's some really good content out there. So I'm gonna give him a little bit of an unsolicited, prop, because it's cool stuff.
And he's building this new car completely from the ground up, designing like the aero, the engine, everything is completely just from his head, and now it's taking shape, and it's going to be wild to see for sure.
No, and I know. I mean, there are a lot of guys in the unlimited class that are going to be bummed because for the next 10 years, like I don't think Robin's going to get it wrong. He had it. They started off with the Wolf and did a really great upgrades to those that were really Pikes Peak specific. And now with the new car being able to go ground up, I think it's going to be good. Maybe he'll have some teething problems or whatever, so maybe there's a small window that you can be good. But I think once he gets that thing done, it's going to be game over for the unlimited class. He'll be there for a minute.
For sure. Well, and so what I wanted to ask you about with the different cars you've driven is like, what would you say is the biggest priority of the chassis? And maybe like if you had to design this ideal car, like is the drivetrain most important? Would it be all-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, what have you? What kind of power, like where does power matter? Where does suspension matter? Brakes, aerodynamics, like kind of how would you rank the various different characteristics of the car if you were going to go and kind of put together your dream car at Pikes Peak?
Yeah, good question. I think weight is probably one of the most overlooked factors. And weight just plays a part in everything that the car does. It's not just the acceleration, but it's the deceleration, it's the changing of directions. All of these things, and the hill at Pikes Peak is really steep. As a cyclist, I'll tell you, I've ridden up it, and it is way steeper on a bike than it is in the car. And so you start really kind of getting an understanding of how big, how important weight is. And, obviously the next bit of that is that, if you can't get the weight, you've got to get the horsepower. So there are a lot of cars out there that are big horsepower cars that are able to make time just because they've got the power. Now, I don't think it's horsepower so much. I think it's torque more than anything else. I think you need as much torque as you can possibly, that your mechanical grip can handle. And in that, the thing that increases your mechanical grip is going from a rear wheel or front wheel drive to an all wheel drive car. So the tough part about an all wheel drive car is the same kind of with a front wheel drive car, is that it's really tough to get them to rotate. It's really tough to get them to turn. So, I think there needs to be a chassis and suspension design that allows that all to happen. So I think what you have to look at and from a race car perspective is that the car is one thing. It's not just power, it's not just weight, it's not just suspension. It's all of these things working in a system together to produce the result. So I don't think you can just do one thing or focus on one thing to the detriment of everything else. I mean, obviously at the end of it all, aero is important, but I think from my perspective, and Robin will probably slap me upside the head and go, no, but I think aero is almost the thing you add at the end. I think you make your car work, and then you add aero to it. I mean, and some of that has to be integral to the car itself in the design, but I think for the most part, getting the car to work on a mechanical grip basis with the power and the weight, I think is by far the most important.
Optimizing the power and the weight and mechanical grip, and then whatever aero you can fit on or as needed.
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough because then you start looking at it from the power perspective, and it's why the Volkswagens and the EVs are so quick, even the Hyundais, because they've got the instant torque coming off the corner. I mean, it is full torque as soon as you tip in on the throttle. And so, and then you look at the IDR, same thing. It's a fully designed car, but it's got that torque coming off the corners. It's actually why, this is the last couple of years running the GT4 and now the GT3. It's been really interesting to me because I've learned a lot, because I'm literally running. I start at the start line. Those cars are 515, 520 horsepower at sea level. But at the start line, I'm running probably 400 horsepower. And then by the time I get to the top, I'm at 290, 295, somewhere in there. So I'm driving a big Miata at that point. And so it's really interesting to me to understand the dynamic of power and how power plays into it, and how handling can I won't say make up for a lot of it, but help cover the lack of power. And that's, the Cup car is absolutely brilliant with that. I mean, to be able to turn in really early and get to throttle super early, that covers a lot of the loss of torque, because I'm on throttle so much sooner than a lot of the competitors that are turbocharged cars, and I can commit to full throttle. And so it's interesting. I mean, I was actually pleasantly surprised at how quick that car was. I think we would have been, had we run to the top, looking in data, probably at about a 955, 956, somewhere in there. And to have a normally aspirated car as a sub 10-minute car that you basically buy off the shelf from Porsche, is pretty cool. So that changed some of my thinking on what's important on the car. I've also had more fun driving the Porsches over the past couple of years than anything else I've had on the mountain. Like you have to wring the neck out of those cars to get the time. Like it is as on the edge as I've ever been. And this is as hard as I've pushed, because we knew we had, the class win was there, but you have Donahue and, and that's always a thing, but to be in that range where we knew we could be competitive was, we had to push really hard. So I, definitely took more risks this year than I've ever taken on the hill before. So
with the Cup car, do you think that's in part because it's naturally aspirated, and so you kind of are losing power as you go up, and so you've got to really kind of be on the throttle as much as you can as you go up in elevation, just to keep the speed, keep the momentum going?
Yeah, you have to drive it differently though, from the bottom of the mountain to the top, because you do have 400 horsepower at the bottom. But even then, like the car is designed for well over 500 horsepower. So you're basically have more car than you have power at that point. And so that's what you're trying to maximize. But then the biggest problem with the hairpins is that you lose the ability to rotate the car on throttle. On the lower sections, you can still break the rear free a little bit and be able to catch the car. But if you notice my in-car video that's posted up a bunch of places on YouTube, I'm very, very smooth in the car. There's not a lot of movement on the wheel. I'm not saying, because literally I physically can't get the car to break free. And if you're trying to do that, you're actually going slow. If you're waiting for the car to break free to catch it, it struggles to do it low, and then it definitely won't even think about doing it on the upper end. So you've really got to just be committed on throttle and ride it through. Like I was actually really happy looking at the throttle traces in the data. And you can see if you're committed to full throttle, it's basically a vertical straight line. And if you're kind of feeding in the throttle, it does that. And literally, it looks like a go-kart trace. You're just like whacking open the throttle, and you can't lift at all, because when it's a steep hill, you lose momentum, you lose a whole bunch of stuff. And so that's really the big thing is trying to commit to throttle, stay into throttle, and then also be off throttle as little as possible. There are a lot of corners that are very, very quick that aren't quite full throttle. And if you need to lift, lifting as little as possible, like coming up into picnic grounds, there's the long sweeping left hand that isn't quite flat. The front end wants to wash away from you. But, going in through practice and qualifying, I started off at like 40%, holding 40% throttle, and then it was 50, and then it was like 55. And then in the race, I was able to hold like 70, 75% throttle. So I was a lot more committed to throttle, and that showed all the way up. So all of those things, you really got to pay attention to in how you drive the car.
What it sounds like is maybe, like, if there's one aspect of the car that is really important, it's balance. Like the car has to be set up so that it's very predictable, it's very balanced, so that whatever you're doing as far as inputs, it's going to be consistent and predictable. Whereas and maybe this is where aero would get tricky, because like the aero is going to change just as much as you're talking about, like the power and the handling of the car. The aero is going to change all the way up the mountain too, which could really kind of throw that balance off kilter.
Out the window. No, honestly, drivability. It's the number one thing. You can throw everything else out. Drivability, a car that a driver feels confident in at Pikes Peak. And that's a general thing. Like, it doesn't make a difference where you are. If the driver doesn't have confidence in the car, it's really hard to turn in the lap time. But, and that's where everyone talks about, with Max Verstappen in F1, how committed he is and how comfortable he is. No matter what the car is doing, he has the confidence to be able to do it. And I think that's what makes him a special driver. But for all the rest of us mortals, the having the confidence in the car, and especially at a place like Pikes Peak, you have to know where the car is going to end up, because it's not like, you go to Laguna Seca and you drop 2 wheels in the gravel, no big deal, you keep going. Pikes Peak, that gravel goes down 1,000 feet. And so you have to know that I can put the car there consistently every single time. And then the biggest part and the toughest part is that it's a single run. And we haven't seen the course since the Friday. So you have all the rest of the Friday, all the rest of the Saturday until Sunday. So you basically have almost 2 full days of not being back on track. And then for the race, having to commit to something that you really aren't sure about. And not only that, but it's open to the public. So the public has dropped oil, the public has pulled gravel, and obviously they try to do a good job in cleaning it up. But again, the more confidence you have in the car, the less all of those variables play into effect, and you're able to commit more.
So if you had a car that checks all of those boxes for you to run up Pikes Peak or the Nurburgring, like if you had the car that checked all the same boxes as the Nurburgring, do you think it would be ready to run up Pikes Peak, or vice versa? Or are they just so different that the car that would basically be that predictable driver's car for Pikes Peak would not work on the Nurburgring? Or
no, not even close. They're literally polar opposites. The Nürburgring is so high speed that you actually set your car up to have a small degree of understeer in it. Because if it has oversteer, and especially if it has aero oversteer, you're never going to be fast because the car will never set and take a plant, and you can't just commit to a blind corner where you might have to tighten your steering up. If the car's already got oversteer, you're just going into the wall. Right. Pikes Peak, you cannot have a car that has understeer in it. Like, it is the most frustrating thing at Pikes Peak, simply because you can't commit to throttle and you're having to lift all the time, and then that's killing your momentum up the hill. Pikes Peak, more than anything else, is balance. Like, you literally, you don't want to you can probably live with a bit more oversteer just because the speeds are so slow. But again, it's a car that you just have to be able to grab by the scruff of the neck and go, this is what you're going to do. And the car just does that. And that's, again, where, like, the cars that I've run at Pikes Peak, other than the Corvette, we've developed for a while. Like, so we know the Cup car, we know the GT4s, we knew the Audi, the TTRS, and then even the Blue Water car that I drove. That was their local tuners, and so we were, we worked together, and I've driven that car a bunch too. So all of those cars, I had a substantial amount of seat time in, and I was a part of the development. If not of the car itself, I was part of the development of the suspension, the setup, the handling, and all of that stuff. So they were cars that I was very comfortable with going up the mountain. And the Corvette was a whole other thing, and that was the car I enjoyed least going up the mountain. It was a beast. Sure. I mean, it was almost 1,000 horsepower, and it sounded good, and it looked good, and everybody loved it. But car scared the crap out of me because it just did whatever it wanted to do, and you were just along for the ride.
It's like, this is the importance of development. It's like you're figuring out all of the adjustments that you can make, what the effect of those adjustments is, and you're kind of putting those in your toolbox so that when you get in the car and you drive it, you shake it down, whatever, you know what your options are as far as, like, can I take some of this understeer out? Can I create more understeer? Like, can I get the car to be more neutral? Do I want it to, what
you need to know what the car wants, and that's the thing. You understand the language of whatever the car is trying to tell you. But I mean, honestly, too, the other thing is having, not learning a car on the mountain, because, again, if we go testing at Pueblo or HPR, if I go off, I go off. It's no big deal. I ride through the grass for a bit. I get back on, no harm, no foul. You can't do that at Pikes Peak. And Clint Bashholtz drove our GT4 car this year. And, it was taking him a while to adapt to it. I mean, he ended up, going well and getting third in class and doing a great job. But when we were doing our testing, the difference is for us, Clint was doing everything right. I was just so much more comfortable in the car because I had literally just won the GT4, SRO GT4 championships in that thing. So it was like, I know what it's going to do. I don't even have to think about it. And so, whereas, Clint was like, well, the car's moving around a bit. And I'm like, yeah, it's going to do that. Ignore it. Just keep going. But it's really hard to tell a driver, hey, the car's moving around. Just ignore it. It's not going to do anything. And then especially when you go to Pikes Peak, it's like, the car's moving around and you're like, I'm going to lift, so,
so once you run out of horizon that you don't see, I'm going to back off a little bit.
I'm going to back off of that. So it's and Clint's an amazing driver. It was really great working with him this year. I mean, he and I have been friends for a while, but to work with him this year on that and see his professionalism, and like, there's, him and his family are legends of the mountain. Again, these are all more things in my career that I love doing because, when I was at Pikes Peak, as a kid, the Bashholtzes were dominating Pikes Peak. So you're just like, it's cool that I get to work with Clint. But no, he was doing a great job in the car. And so, the differences were my confidence in what that was because I'd driven it. And so, that is the thing. And it's one of those things that I have now in my mental bag of tricks for going forward is that no matter what we do, the car that we are bringing, I need to have time and it needs to be tested. Sure. We need to have, it's not just showing up to the mountain, you rock up and you go, hey, we're here. It's like, well, no, there's 2 or 3 or 4 months of testing and development, bare minimum in all of this. And, in looking at building our car for 26, 27, or for 27, 28, we've already had that conversation. It's not like the deadline isn't first day of practice for Pikes Peak. The deadline is 3 months before that, so that we can go and spend 3 months developing the car and making sure that, I'm comfortable in it and we can get the most out of it.
For sure. Okay, so Rob, as we're winding down here, and first, thanks again for making the time and having this conversation. Really appreciate it. I want to pull back, like, big picture here, because you've through fortune or circumstance, you've found your path into motorsports and to the point where you are now. If you're working with somebody right now, like that's you when you're a kid watching the Pikes Peak hill climb and you're trying to get into this, one, like how different do you think it is now for somebody that's trying to get into motorsport compared to what it was when you started? And what advice would you give to somebody that's in that situation, that's trying to start now and find their path and circumstance forward?
Good question. In some cases it's easier, in some cases it's harder. So honestly, the biggest thing that I will say is sim racing has made it substantially easier. I won't say easier. It's lowered the bar a bit, because going into it, you're gonna have a good idea of the car. You're gonna have a great idea of the tracks. You know, when I first started off, like every single track I went to was like, which way do I go? You know, what does it look like? I mean, my idea of learning a track was finding anyone that had any information, any videos, anything. Right. But even back then, I mean, I'm dating myself, but we didn't have a lot of YouTube. We didn't have all of these in-car cameras. And so it really was, you're going there for the first time. And, you know, I remember tiptoeing out of the pits in my first, like, okay, where are we going? So that's the first thing is that I think that has basically made things a little bit easier in terms of just the driving. But also too, just the seat time. Like, you know, the kids these days, you look at it, you know, and then you jump into a sim race and you look at that, you know, how good a lot of these kids are. You know, I think that's made it easier. It is harder because there are less professional opportunities out there. And it's just tough. There's never been a lot of professional opportunities. It is incredibly difficult. And, you know, the biggest thing is budgets right now. Budgets are absolutely insane. You know, we're, you know, in SRO, we're $700,000-800,000 on a GT4 season. IMSA, it's, you know, 1.2, 1.3 on a GT4 budget. You know, you're looking at you know, 2 million plus on a GT3, if not more than that. You know, and even Pikes Peak, I mean, it's great because it's accessible. It's one race, but even Pikes Peak, I mean, we're, you know, $60,000-70,000 on a race weekend very easily, you know, crew and houses and all of these things. So that's the hardest part. And I have a lot of kids that come up to me and they're asking, how do I get into it? And it's like, well, the first thing is that you gotta do the best thing you can do for the budget that you have. You know, everybody wants to be in F1, everybody wants to be in IndyCar, everybody wants to be in GT3, but the budgets I just gave you are the budget. So unless you have the ability to write a $2 million check for multiple years, you're just stuck. So I understand. And I'm the dreamer. I'm the big dreamer. So I never want to, you know, smash anyone's dream. So, but the reality of it is, figure out a way to start at a lower level. Figure out what your budget is, and being able to get into the best car for the money that you have will do more for your career than saying, hey, I have enough money scraped together to do one GT3 race. And it's like, well, that's great. These guys have been in the car for 5 years and great teams and huge budgets. I don't care how talented you are, you're just not going to overcome cubic dollars when you get to that level. And so from my perspective, if you can find the spec Miata, if you can find the spec, you know, E30, you know, all of those things that are, you know, lower, or even if you're starting to move up, the GR86 Cup and touring car and all of those things, those are, I mean, they're still high budgets, but they're way more attainable than trying to, you know, shoot for the moon. And even if you have the budget, I know a lot of guys that have, you know, $500,000 and they're like, all right, we're gonna find the cheapest team that we can to spend our $500,000 because that's the only way we can get into this. And again, you're just never going to beat the big teams that are testing all the time and that are developing, that have all the data, that have all of these things. So as opposed to taking that money and trying to go to the next level, take that money and be the big dog in whatever series you are. And that'll do more for your ability to showcase your talents than anything else.
And develop those talents.
And develop those talents. Because that's what everybody overlooks.
You got to put the tools in the toolbox first. Absolutely.
Everybody always overlooks. I mean, you know, testing, seat time. Like, there is absolutely 100% nothing that beats seat time. You can't just rock up to a race 8 times a year, not having driven the car for the month prior to the race, and expect to run at the front of any field, you know. And but especially these days, because the cars are so equal, because of BOP and everything else, it is very much drivers oriented now. And so you look at the top guys, and I'm saying GT4 because that's the series that I've had the last big experience in. We won the championships, but we were testing every single week. We were in the car, we were out at High Plains, even if we weren't at the track we were testing at, developing the suspension ideas, developing aero, getting a better understanding for the car. And then just me as a driver, knowing how now to extract every little tiny bit out of the car. And you just don't get that. And that's not something that sim translates to. You can't just go, hey, well, I've got sim time. Like, knowing the car inside and out is absolutely crucial. And series like WRL are great. They've got things balanced really well there. Driving standards, could be better, but at the end of the day, if you're looking at budget, that's also the most seat time you're going to get for the money. And there are a lot of teams that are bringing on quick kids to help partner with their gentleman drivers. So, that's Jaden Landers and a couple of other guys that I've been working with. We've been steering them into stuff like that because the opportunities there are really, really good. And it gives those drivers the opportunity to help their gentleman drivers, but it also gives them a lot of seat time as well to help develop their skill set to go back into SRO and into IMSA and be able to be front runners there without having to go spend $1 gazillion.
For sure. Well, Rob, it sounds like Pikes Peak, you're thinking 26, 27, 28. You've got something in the works. Is there anything else kind of on your horizon that you're wanting to try, or maybe anything else left on your bucket list that you want to do?
No, everything. I mean, I love driving. I mean, it's just, my race cars are my happy place. Stick me in there and I'll be happy. So, bucket list stuff. I've not done Le Mans. That's the one race that I've never done, and it's there. I had an opportunity years ago that fell through, so I'd love to maybe see if there's something there going forward. But Le Mans, is a big ask for the partners, for all of our sponsors to come on board. Unless Mobil One decides to write a $1 million check, I don't know that's kind of on the list, but we'll see. You never know. Yep. The nice thing about the way the FIA works is that as you get older, they change your rating, and so. I have silver or gold level pace, but I'm a bronze level driver. So there are teams looking for fast bronzes, and hopefully, that keeps me on the list of things. But I also love, honestly, going back and doing a lot of the stuff that I've done, because I've had a chance to do a lot of really cool things. And, going back to Macau, or going back to Bathurst, or going back to the Nürburgring, you don't get any better than that. Like, it really is just amazingly good fun. And, obviously I'm super competitive, so I'm going to go to win. But I think going without the pressure to win is a completely more enjoyable experience. I think all of my sponsors are super happy with the results that we're able to generate, for them year after year. Hella and Mila and Mobil One and all of these other companies that have been really, really great partners. They're happy to kind of go and be a part of that journey. And so that's kind of cool, that partners that are just like, hey, let's go, let's take the journey and have the experience. So we'll see. But this is not just Pikes Peak. We're probably going to do Mount Washington this year, next year. So that's always been one that's been kind of on the back of the list. So, you figure Pikes Peak, Mount Washington's the next one you got to do. And since they only do it every 3 years, not getting any younger. So this is a good opportunity to do that.
It seems like just as complicated as Pikes Peak, but a completely different environment. But super challenging.
Yeah, trust me, it's sitting up right up here on my sim right now. So, nice. So I'll go out and that's the nice thing about this, is that it's lowering the barrier to entry. I have to go out to New Hampshire and spend a couple of weeks there driving up and down the road all day. But to be able to get most of that done here, is it makes it a lot easier for me.
Absolutely. Well, so Rob, for people that want to follow along, see what you're up to, what you're doing next, where's the best place for them to find you?
Instagram, Robb Holland 3, Rob with 2 B's. And just follow along Facebook, all of the socials. We try to throw some stuff up on YouTube. And then with, kind of all of our partners, like they flood the, I'm tough. I'm an old school guy. Like the whole social media thing, like I get, but I'm like, most of my day is hanging out playing with my puppy. So it's like, I don't know that everybody wants to watch that content. So I don't do as good a job as posting. So hopefully we'll change that. But, if you follow along with Hella or Mila, Mobile One, H&R Springs, Porsche Motorsports, we'll repost some of our stuff, FCP Euro, Yokohama Tires. All of those guys are posting all our stuff all the time. So please give those guys a like and a follow too, because obviously that helps me keep giving you guys the content that I can give you.
Absolutely. Brilliant.
Helps keep an old guy like me employed. So.
Absolutely. Keeps the whole thing running.
Absolutely. So please give those guys a like and a follow. And again, guys, it's good fun to be able to do all of these things, and I'm glad everybody comes along for the ride. It's I enjoy it, and I hope you guys enjoy it too.
Yeah, it's you're kind of showing your path, and that's going to be inspiration or a guide for somebody else that wants to get on the same path at some point.
Yeah, well, hopefully we get more and more. I mean, it's been great to see the interest in motorsport grow, and especially with all the F1 stuff. We're seeing more and more guys get into motorsport, so it's exciting to me. I'm glad that I'm still in the sport at this time.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of, it seems like motorsports across the board is kind of getting a little bit of a resurgence, which is nice to see.
Yeah, again, keeps my mortgage paid. So thanks, guys.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, thanks again for making the time. Thanks for the conversation. Thanks everybody at home for watching and your support as always. And until next time, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Flatiron Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. Once again, we'd like to let you know that your support is what makes this show possible. Be sure to check out our online store at flatironstuning.com for any of your aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts needs. And as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.